Good afternoon, candidates. Welcome to Muet speaking test. So there are question sheets provided in front of you all, and you guys are given 1 minute to read the question sheet. And if you guys have any question, you may ask after 1 minute.
Time starts now. Okay, time is up. Candidates, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, you have 2 minutes to prepare a response. Time starts now.
You may start now.
Good afternoon to the examiners and fellow candidates. Sometimes there exists a generation gap between the young and the old. This could be due to a difference in interests. First and foremost, I will explain a little bit about generation gap. Generation gap is difference between the people from different generations. This will cause lack of understanding between of them. Next, there is a difference in interest during their free time. During the older generation, people prefer to play traditional games during their free time. As an example, gasing, congkak, and wow. In today's generation, people prefer to play games too during their free time, but they are interested in games in their gadgets, such as mobile game, PlayStation, and Xbox.
Okay, time is up. Candidate A, your conclusion?
In a nutshell, difference in interest do create generation gap between the older generation and the young generation. Thank you.
You may start now.
Good morning, everyone. Based on the situation given, generation gap actually could be due to a difference in experience between the two age groups. First of all, the older generation likes to insert their experience and opinions on younger generations. For example, our grandparents will tell us not to point at the moon or else our ears will be cut away. And the older generation seems to stay strong to what values they have learned and stick with them no matter what. While younger generation seems to question such values and learn to form opinions themselves. Besides, the younger generations are in a more open-minded society, and the older generations seems to be more close-minded to different ideas and viewpoints, while younger generation seems to embrace them. For example, the older generations are totally against homosexuality, while the younger generation seems more willing to accept ideas of homosexuality. Also, lack of mutual understanding, difference of age or experience, and atmospheric changes are also the reason of generation gap. Sometimes, we as the millennials will find it hard to continue or even start a conversation with our grandparents. This is because our thinking does not resonate with the older generation, because our experience are totally different.
Candidate B, your conclusion?
In conclusion, difference in experience cause generation gaps between the young and old. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate B.
Good afternoon to the examiners and also fellow candidates. So the topic discussed today would be generation gap between young and old. So my point of view on this particular topic is a difference in communication of age. So what are the type of differences that can actually be seen between the younger generation and old generation? The old generation follows a certain type of close conversation where they prefer to tell that it's an older talk, and sometimes young generations are forbidden from joining in. This is because they believe that young generations are not having that particular experience, but then contrary to likewise, the young millennials now are actually more up to date in compared to the older generation. Particularly, this is because of the advancement of technology, where any type of particular information can actually be reached at our fingertips. So, another type of influence that happens in a difference in communication is also personal and professional experience held by the older generation. They would often think that they would stick to traditional values, and well, that type of conversation would sometimes make the younger generation feels constricted, because as candidate B has said, us young generation likes to embrace the type of change. We are more open to others, so having a type of conversation would actually dampens our mood in creating a conversation with the old generation. So one solution that I might advise is for both generation, young and old, to actually find a common ground where they can practice to communicate between each other. So to not make it
time's up.
easy, and then
Can I see?
Between there, they can actually not stick to a certain stigma and try to build up a good relationship and communication skills. So in my conclusion, there is a difference in communication of age between the young and old, but it can actually be seen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, candidate C. Next up for candidate D, you have 2 minutes to prepare to present your views. Time starts now.
Okay, good morning to examiners and good morning to my fellow candidates. So today we are going to discuss about sometimes there exists a generation gap between the young and old, and what does it happen? And the thirdly is about this could be due to a difference in attitude of the two between the two ages. So my first main point is about attitude towards his family members. People belonging to the old generations live in a joint family. That is which they believe in moral values such as caring and sharing. However, this concept has really deteriorated over the generation. The current generations wants freedom, and there is hardly to see anyone who follows the tradition or culture of the old generation. And the reason is the young generations will feel embarrassed because they're still doing the same thing with the old generations, and that is behind the times for them. The second point is about the workplace attitude. People belong to the early generations were good at taking directions and were loyal to a single employee, but the new generations will get bored quite quickly and seek for the new jobs within few years and even few months. And this due to the young people are innovative, and they would like to share and implement their own unique ideas rather than quickly taking directions from their boss. The third main point is about the young generation, the new generations are open-minded about the openness. The old generation seems to be more close-minded to different ideas and viewpoints. For example, the bubble tea. The young generations would like to buy a bubble tea from a shop, but the old generation seems to think this behavior is a waste of their money. So in the conclusion, I think that the generations gap will happen is because due to the difference in attitude between the two ages. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate D. Okay, for every candidate, you have 2 minutes to prepare for the discussion for task B. Time starts now.
So time's up. Candidates, you are given 10 minutes for the discussion, and anyone may start the discussion now.
The topic for today's discussion is about the generation gap. We will be discussing which of the following is the main cause for the generation gap, whether it is difference in interest, difference in experience, difference in the way the two age groups communicate, or difference in attitude. In my opinion, the main cause for the generation gap is difference in interest. As I have mentioned before, they spend their free time using their gadgets, but the elders spend their free time communicate with each other, with their friends, with their neighbors, and else. So, there will be lack of communicate between the young generation. Hence, they will not communicate much, and they are antisocial, and their communication skills will be low too. And what do you think, Candidate B?
I agree with your opinion. Technological gadgets, electronic media, and entertainment industry are another reason for generation gap. Yes, I agree. As this thing involve people so much in their interest of field of interest. Hence, the younger generation will tend to choose to spend their time with their electronic gadgets rather than bonding with their grandparents. Okay, that's all.
Sorry if I interrupt, Candidate B, but I think the main cause of this generation gap is because of due to the different attitude. Because I believe that everything that change between the young and old depend on the different attitude between young and old. Laziness, selfishness, and also greediness have affect the new generations. Since the old generations have made life easier for us, but I think that many of young generations do not appreciate and take it for granted. So there are many youngs are self-focused. They only care about what they want and how soon they will get the things that they dream to for it. And they also lack the value of hard work and achievement. They are rare to see someone really genuine to work hard for something. They have the mentality that they can do anything without any consequence and punishment. So, since many members young generation are under these false illusions, it may relate back to how previous generations have treated us in young generation today. So, and this causes the young generations do not have to earn it themselves. So, in a nutshell, I think that, sorry, candidate C, have you any points of add to?
Yes, actually I do. Regarding to what candidate A said, that there was a different interest among young and old, which actually affected and created a generation gap between both age. Are you actually implying that both father and son or mother and daughter cannot have the same interest where they can actually spend their time together?
Actually, no, I didn't agree that mother and daughter and father and son cannot have the same interest. They could have the same interest, but the older generation that I'm talking about is the grandparents. The grandparents who live in their hometown that are countryside, not in the city. So I'm explaining about that.
So you're implying that the different environment of upbringing actually it's actually what creates the generation gap between young and old?
Yes, but actually the different interest also affects it. If it's not for their interest in gadget, they will communicate more between the grandparents and grandchild. But it's because their interest in gadgets are too much that they didn't communicate much. They didn't communicate at all if some of the family. So what do you think, candidate D? Are you still opposing my opinion?
I still want to oppose your meaning, but I think everything is start from different attitude, right? If you the interest about you saying just now is about different gadget, yes.
Difference in interest.
Different interest that the young generation like to play their gadgets and gadget, but this actually depends of their attitude, because the young generations cannot are not self-implemented compared to the old generations. They would like to have search for the normal funds for funds activities than the old generation. The old generation prefer that more traditions things like reading newspaper and willing to spend their leisure times on talking to their grandsons and share everything that interests that happens in their daily life. So I think the main cause of this generation still is about the attitude. So
How about candidate
I
B?
oppose. I think the main reason is still about the technology because younger generations since young, like age 1 or 2, their parents, if they are very busy, they will just throw their phone, throw their iPad to their kids. So they don't really have the time to teach them the right attitude. So because of that, they develop a negative attitude, not all, some. So I think the main reason is by the generation. The main reason that cause generation gap is technology. And
Excuse me. Alright. So, for example, from what I've heard from candidate B and candidate D, candidate B stated that it was technology, it was what created the generation gap, and candidate candidate D said that attitude was actually the main problem. Alright. So actually, you guys have both candidates actually can go to a common ground, which was my point, which was a difference in communication of age. If, as candidate B said, when parents are busy, they would actually chuck their iPads, their iPhones to their kids for them to spend their time. And actually, it doesn't actually create from my point of view, it doesn't actually create a negative sort of impact. It just creates a sense of independence, because actually, apart from referring to their parents, they can actually refer to technology and to attitude. If you're saying about attitude, then it's actually about ego between young and old. So to actually to meet a midpoint to solve this type of problem, I would say that it's actually communicative. I mean, if it's like a huge gap between age barriers where both sides cannot communicate successfully. Communicating means both sides are understanding the intention of what the other side wants to imply, no matter how they actually say it. So let's say young and old, one type of difference in communication is vocabulary and linguistic differences. Old people tend to focus more on analogies because they would always say like, alright, so back in my days, my dad would actually whack me if I did not take my bath now. And then kids nowadays, they tend to be more straightforward and actually listening to this kind of context repeating every day. It's kind of irritating for them. So instead of they take that advice, they would actually disregard that sort of advice. So that's what I said just now, is that for the young and old to actually find a common ground where they can actually practice back communicating. They start back how they were.
But I disagree. Don't you think that the gadget is the main cause of they didn't communicate well and their attitude changed because of gadgets? Because of their interest in gadget. They are too interested in gadgets that their attitude changing through the generation, and their communication is not much. That's my point of view.
Sorry, but the time's up. Candidates, please come into a conclusion.
So what do you think? Candidates?
So guys, for each of the candidates actually have
their
quite
own
a strong
point.
points.
So we conclude that each candidate have their own view of point, and
actually all ideas can actually apply on their daily life, depending on sort of view on how you want to tackle the situation.
Yes, I agree about it. So, in a nutshell, our
Group discussions.
group discussion has decided that we have our own opinion on the main cause for the generation gap. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Okay, the Muet English test ends now.